Ah, well, Polestar's hard. Anyway, in the last video I talked about how I was up to 299 Switch games, and number 300 finally arrived a few days ago, and it's this one, Cosmic Fantasy Collection via Limited Run Games, produced by Idea. These are two not so known, as well as far I know, they're not known to me at least, PC Engine role-playing games that they've put on a Switch cartridge here with a new text-only translation. The only game in this series that got an official English localized translation back in the day was Cosmic Fantasy 2. I think it had a dub and everything, but not the first one, and they're using some kind of subtitle overlay for these. But let's see what's inside here. Open them up. See if there's anything inside. Some Switch games, most Switch games are usually a little bit disappointing. Is it just gonna be white on the cartridge? No, there's actually some artwork inside here, and surprisingly enough, full color manual. Well, a little booklet, I would say. I don't know how much of a manual it is, but it does give some background description on some of the characters. And yeah. Oh, and it gives a nice list of what the magic spells does. A lot of the games, a lot of RPGs have like obscure names for magic spells, and you have to like guess which does what. But here you get a nice list. And of course we have the cartridge itself. Why don't we try inserting it here? Okay, inserted the cartridge. First order of business here. Let's see what kind of version we're on here. We're on version 1.0, and let's see if we need an update. Nope. Version 1.0 is the definitive version with no update, and that's great. I mean, they made the game as it was intended to play and completely bug-free, just like in the good old days. Well, maybe not completely bug-free, but well, they finished the games before putting them out, so that was something. Anyway, let's why don't we go over to some gameplay and take a look at how the games look on the Switch.
Amai na. その甘さ。この星では命取りになるぞ。
君は
I love the PC Engine. It just fills me with so much nostalgia. Not because I had it back in the day. The PC Engine pretty much wasn't present at all in my part of the world, but it was just something about cutscenes with full voice acting like the CD-ROM games have here, and then large cartoon pictures. I know it was just everything I would have wanted back in 1990 when the first Cosmic Fantasy was released. Playing as a space adventurer named you end up crashing on an underdeveloped planet. So, you know, pretty heavy Star Trek vibes right from the get-go. And you quickly makes a name for himself by, you know, exploring the planet and helping out people with their kobold problems and all other monster-related activities, before eventually going up against some kind of ultimate evil. You know, pretty standard stuff for a Japanese role-playing game. Some other pretty standard stuff for a Japanese role-playing game is the grind. I was kind of half expecting it to be sort of brutal. Enemies hit like a ton of bricks and you constantly gotta stay in some areas and just grind away so you can level up and become powerful enough to take on the next area. But I was actually kind of surprised to see just how friendly the game can be at times. Of course, it doesn't explain what any of the spells does. That's what the manual is for. It does have a very nice in-game manual, fully translated from Japanese, that you can use to look up anything you want on the fly. But they also have this really neat feature in town where you can look at a description at items before you buy them. Something you might take for granted today, but definitely wasn't the norm back in the day. They also show the stat differences, so you can get an idea if it's a better weapon than the one that you are using right now. With all that combat going on, it's actually pretty easy if you do go down. Well, first of all, the combat, it's pretty much in and out. It's super fast, quickly, works great. And if you do go down, you of course go back to your last save spot. There's no game over screen and all the way back out into the menu. They just kind of pop you back to town and say, hey, you had a nightmare, let's get a move on. And get right back out into the action again. Very nice. Furthermore, it's pretty easy to get back into town if you're out in the overworld. You are accompanied by like kind of a comic side character called Monmo, who doesn't help you out in combat, but can transform into a motorbike and quickly transport you back to town and get you back and healed up and buying some items and get ready to hit the field once again. Now, Cosmic Fantasy is pretty light on other characters. You do get another character called Saya later in the game. She will be like your magic user and primary healer. But you also does have some spells that he can't always use. They kind of like psychic powers, and he'll only be able to access them part of the story when he sees something really traumatic or something that gets him really fired up, that activates his psychic powers that you use just like magic abilities. So yeah, Cosmic Fantasy 1 might not be a looker. It doesn't really have the best overworld graphics. But as I said, it is very friendly to play in a way, just comparatively speaking to any other classic JRPG where any game is the first in a series. The games were rough back then, man. Moving on to Cosmic Fantasy 2, this is, as I said at the top of the video, it's a brand new translation. It's the original Japanese game with subtitles, and some people will be a little bit upset that we didn't get the American dub. A lot of old dubs can be really bad, but if you listen to some clips from the TurboGrafx version of Cosmic Fantasy 2, the voice actors really went all out on this one.
Stop! You can't do this! As Wisdom Great Galem's right hand, I can do whatever I want! And you can't stop me!
紋章の入ったペンダント?
綺麗でしょう。このペンダントはラーラの大切な
This time, you play as a local farm boy named Van, who goes on a journey to rescue his girlfriend after she gets kidnapped by an evil wizard who discovers that she is actually a secret princess. So no outer space Star Trek shenanigans from the get-go, but there will be that later in the game. This is a 4-chapter game, and seems like a much grander scale of a story this time around. So better story, better graphics, unfortunately not better gameplay. I feel like they kind of regressed in this department. I don't know if you can tell from this video clip here, but every time that a dialogue box appears now, both when you attack hits, when that enemy attacks you back, and when they hit, you have to press to close that dialogue box. So you basically just I'm just mashing the button here to get through combat. It actually makes me wish I had like an auto-fire control on the Switch here. They also took out the description for the items in the town, so now you have to go, every time you equip a new thing, you have to go into your stats and see what has changed there. They did add a bunch of new spells to the game, and those are in the manual, but unlike the first game, nowhere does it tell you how many mana points each spell use, so you have to like guesstimate that as well from just using them. Very annoying. And half of the new spells feels like they kind of do the same. It's like paralyzing enemies, putting enemies to sleep, turning enemies to stone. Basically status effect spells. That feels a little bit like a waste of a time. Fortunately, enemies don't really hit like a ton of brick anymore. They kind of chip away your health. So you'll just kind of be mashing away and just have to keep an eye on your health to make sure you top it up with a health potion or healing spell every once in a while. You also get a pretty big rotation of guest characters, but just be aware that this is an old school RPG, so they will just leave as part of the story all of a sudden and take whatever items you gave them with them. So don't equip them with all your best stuff. I don't know if you can actually kind of soft lock yourself out of the game by giving them key items, but probably not. They would have thought of that, right? I don't know, I didn't really try that. I did try saying no to a lot of quests in the first game, and it would just loop over and over again, asking you to say yes. That was... you always gotta try that. I think Paper Mario is the only game that kind of gives you a game over if you just spam no, and I'm not interested in helping. Oh yeah, by the way, there's no fast travel back to town spell or ability this time around. So yeah, overall Cosmic Fantasy 2 is a much less friendly game than the first one, but it does seem to have a story at a much more epic scale. And I mean, what else were you gonna play on your PC Engine CD back in the day if you wanted a traditional turn-based Japanese role-playing game? I can't think of any other game that were on the system. So while none of these games are masterpieces, I do hope that they consider translating the next Cosmic Fantasy collection, which is Cosmic Fantasy 3 and 4, already out in Japan. And this is what I love about the Switch. It's all these kind of old school, truly obscure games that you wouldn't expect to ever see the light of day, and we are so lucky that we actually get them translated into English now. The Cosmic Fantasy Collection is a fantastic historical piece, and a game that I'm more than happy to own as the number 300 Switch game in my collection.
1年間もパトロール勤務だなんてさ。
Gentlemen, let me show you something.
Fantastic! The most exciting thing we can do in a character-based shooter is have more characters. Launch a new character, and we're going to be doing that on a regular cadence. That takes a lot of work and a lot of time to get those just right. And that's where the idea of variants came in.
I don't know if anyone remembers Concord. This was Sony's relatively recent $400 million project that, unfortunately for them, failed. When I saw it first, I was kind of looking at the gameplay and thinking, probably not my cup of tea. And apparently it wasn't really anyone's cup of tea when it finally came out, because it kind of suffered the biggest problem of all, and that was that it was boring. Now, the game was only up for like 12 days, but before it closed down, there was some interesting stuff going on Twitter, on X, where one of the animation leads on the game came out and said that basically said that people who didn't like the games were talentless freaks. And that really got me thinking, because while I might think all the characters are boring, I've honestly never really designed any characters myself. I haven't really drawn anything since back in my school days, where I used to draw Space Marines instead of paying attention in class. So I thought, why not try it out? Why not design just, 3 characters at least, not a full roster, but just for a little tease, let's try and design 3 different characters for a sort of hero shooter game. And my background for designing these are from 2 games. I've played Team Fortress 2, I've played Overwatch, and I've had enough of these kinds of games just from playing those 2. Those were fine. I did remember seeing a design document on Team Fortress 2 at one point that mentioned that it was important to have like distinguishable outlines of characters so you could like easily bake them out. So here we go. I know Concord was a vaguely space-themed game, so I thought I'd do a bunch of like space characters and aliens, and maybe because I was kind of inspired by Team Fortress 2, my first thought was to draw something akin to the Heavy, the big tank character, and something that I thought would be interesting was to take an inspiration here from a mix of fantasy and real life. So here we have the first character, which is, of course, the famous Russian space dog, Laika. The dog that famously went to space and totally survived all that and came back and lived for many years. She was a true space hero. But as you can see, this gave me an excuse to also draw a Space Marine as a huge character. And much like any traditional tank character, she has a force field on her left arm, a force shield generator that she can activate and protect herself and allies. And she can't attack while using the force field. But on her right arm, she has, of course, a space modified version, a much larger version of the AK-47 called an AK-47,000, and a hatch in the back for extra magazines to switch out with. I was thinking every character should have like an ultimate attack. I wasn't quite sure what to choose for this tank character. Maybe create a dome shield that protects from fire from all directions for a set number of time, or maybe like some kind of jet attack that propels her forward. But maybe that would be a little bit too much like Overwatch. So I don't know. I don't know about this one with ultimate attacks. I did have a more consistent idea for the second character, the sniper character, called J3No. Not really married to that name, but I don't know, that's just what I was able to come up with on the spot. But this is kind of like a sniping robot, as you can see from its design, heavily inspired by like a IG-88 robot from Star Wars. And the cool gameplay idea I had for this character is that he has kind of like these drill feet that he can kind of latch himself, or you can kind of launch himself into walls and ceilings and kind of become kind of like a permanent fixture and have like a sniping position up there. But then his long cape here, he has a tattered cape that he wears. It would drape down, and that would give away his position. So he wouldn't be like completely invisible just by hanging from a ceiling or off a wall, because you would still be able to see that cape dangling in the wind. So there's a lot of consideration to consider where you might attach to a wall or ceiling. Maybe it's a place where there are flags hanging or shrubbery or something that would kind of like hide him a little bit better than it normally would. For the head here, for the robot head, I went with kind of like a 90s mini camcorder design. You see his long sniper rifle here. Doesn't have a scope on it, but that's because he kind of scopes in with his eye, with his camera eye. It's like a telescope lens that kind of extracts like a zoom lens. And for his kind of ultimate attack, I was thinking that maybe he could do like a 360 no scope attack, where he kind of like rotates his torso around, keeping his head and legs in locked position, and then like headshots, maybe an enemy or all enemies in all visible enemies, or maybe just one enemy the furthest away, visible enemy furthest away, or closest enemy. Haven't quite nailed that down, or how it would work in balance, but that's the basic idea, that he gets like his ultimate attack is like a one-shot kill of a visible character that you don't even have to aim at. Finally, I thought I'd also make like a healing character, and I thought I'd go the cute route and make a character here named Zeta, named after Zeta Reculi. As you can see, it's an alien. It's one of the small grey ones, and the grey ones do come from Zeta Reculi 3, apparently, in real life. So I thought I'd go for like a grey alien, but try to make them a little more cuter than kind of the crude pictures you see of them. You see, I designed the eyes here, put a shape on them so it looks a little bit like eyelashes or eyeshadow. No visible mouth here, which I thought would be a cute design as well. And the character here, they're wearing like an oversized NASA coat, that space coat that they got from somewhere. It's part of the mystery behind them, but it's definitely not their size. It's someone else's coat. And of course, since it's a traditional alien, they also use a traditional alien ray gun. That's the thing about this game. It doesn't really have any special weapons or loadouts. The characters just have the weapons that they have. So we can kind of go crazy and have custom weapons for everyone without having to worry about some Call of Duty weapon system. But the gun here, it's a multi-purpose gun. Of course, it has a healing beam. You gotta have a healing beam in these kind of games. At least I know that from Overwatch and Team Fortress 2. Healing beam to heal your friends, and of course a hurting beam to hurt your enemies. Well, maybe not a beam. Maybe it's more like a traditional kind of like ray gun blasts, laser gun blasts. But these grey aliens, they're also said to have like psychic abilities, psychokinetic abilities. So I thought maybe the ultimate attack of this alien is like to shoot out, maybe for an shoot out like an area effect all around the character that maybe stuns all the enemies in a certain radius. This character, as a small grey alien, is of course a lot smaller than all the characters, so I don't know how unbalanced that would be, to have a character that's not as tall as everyone else, and of course have a smaller hitbox. But if it's like this for both teams, well, I don't know, maybe it's fair in the end. But these are the three characters I designed. I don't know what you think about them. Is it a good idea? You can drop me a comment, please, and say what you think about them. Because Concord had a big problem with too much positive toxicity, where no one was allowed to criticize anything. So, but these are three characters I would like to make for a good hero shooter. And if you have any comments on anything I could improve, not just on the characters, but just on the videos in general, do drop me a comment below. Magical. 9, 9, 1999, the release of the SEGA Dreamcast. In the Americas, at least 25 years ago, this console released, not quite in Europe just yet, and way earlier in Japan, but 9999 is just a cool date. It was also the time where it finally did have some games. All the launch games in Japan was mostly only okay, but it had a lot of bangers when it finally came out in 1999. And I don't want to talk about any of those launch games. I actually want to talk about a game that came out a little bit later, which is this one, Render Hero number 1. And this one is a remake of a Sega Mega Drive game. If you look at that game, and if you consider that Shenmue is kind of the father of the modern Yakuza games, you could say that the original Render Hero is kind of the grandfather of Yakuza. And it's very much felt in this remake. It has a lot of the same kind of action RPG settings, kind of taking place in a modern world. The story here in Render Hero number 1 is that the main character, the protagonist, just move into a new town with his family, and it has a sort of a weird mix where it's all clearly Americans in the game, but the town is very Japanese style, even though it does all have American names all over the place. But all the stores and all the places, it's very clearly developed by someone who mostly only have Japanese stores and buildings as a reference. And it's this kind of weird clash of culture that makes this so fascinating, and really helps with the humor of the game. Of course, the original Render Hero on the Mega Drive was a Japanese only game. This one on the Dreamcast is also Japanese only, but thanks to a fan translation, we are finally able to play it in English. And this was a relatively new fan translation. I want to say it came out last year. But as the story goes, we, as I mentioned earlier, we just moved to the town here, and it starts out we're having a party for all the neighbors to get to know them, and we run out of food. So what do? We call the Sega Cafe, and they, of course, promise to deliver some food to us with a little bonus, which turns out to be a superhero suit that they're kind of beta testing, and thought they'd rent out to us. And the super suit, of course, runs on batteries, and the whole idea of the suit is that they will rent it to us. We have to pay a rental fee. So of course you make some money, and what do? Well, you lend your services as a superhero. And these are all kinds of heroic missions, like delivering flyers for the Sega Cafe, or delivering pizza. It's of course we also get into some fights with some real scumbags and get to help people. And ultimately, there's a much deeper plot involving real, actual supervillains. But part of the reason I wanted to bring this up for the 25th anniversary of the Dreamcast is that this is what I consider an essential Dreamcast core game. It has all the style that I personally associate with Dreamcast, and when I think Dreamcast, I think Shenmue, I think, Sonic Adventure, Crazy Taxi, games that have just a lot of handcrafted sprite work. I can't explain, like details you saw later. And again, I want to mention, the Yakuza games. just, when you walk into a store in a Yakuza game and look in the shelf and you see all these hyper detailed products, of course, on modern consoles, it's no issue. You take it for granted that you can see HD textures of real life products, but that's not really what you expected back then. I remember when I played Yakuza on the PlayStation 2 for the first time, just walking into a supermarket and seeing the relatively highly res textures of stuff in a store. That's not what most developer would spend their energy on. So that someone, I don't know, there's just something about graphics like these where I can see that people have spent so much time on minuscule detail that most people who played would just run by and maybe even barely notice. That really makes me feel like the love, kind of love for development of the game, and even in modern games, it's the effort. That kind of effort put into games is something that still can really impress me. I love just spending times in games, just extending the time that it takes to complete them, but just walking around and looking at the graphics sometimes. And this is Render Hero number 1 is definitely one such game. It has a lot of weird things to see and do, and people to talk to with this kind of weird, quirky humor it has to it. Has blatant name rip-offs, like, of course, like My Burger, McDonald's knockoff, and like real-life product placement for Sanyo batteries. And there's just a real charm to the translation. I think not something that the translators made off, because I played a bit of the original as well, and it's pretty faithful, pretty much the same kind of weird stuff they say back in that old Mega Drive game and in this Dreamcast game. So it just has a really funny, quirky sense of humor, and that's something that you also feel the same kind of wacky humor that you kind of get in some of the weirdest side missions that you find in the modern Yakuza games. But as far as the gameplay goes, and if we go deeper into the game here, we also start to get into random encounters. As the game progresses, you get access to an underground facility where you can upgrade your suit and learn new moves from all the money you accumulate. And some of the earliest moves you learn are, of course, from a hero that real Sega fans probably remember. Of course, it's Segata Sanshiro, who teaches you your first basic combo of the game. But one really interesting thing about this open world is that this isn't a game with like objective markers that just point on your map and tells you where to go. You have to like read the clues and run around and investigate, and kind of actually have to remember for yourself where everything is. This kind of gets extra tricky when you're like delivering pizzas, delivering food, which is on a time limit, and they just tells you to bring it to like the Robinsons' house. So you have to remember where the Robinsons live. So it's an open world. Of course, it's an old game, so it's not a massive open world, but it's certainly big enough, and again with a ton of detail and a ton of stuff to see. It's a shame that this game never got an international release, because I think it has a very universal appeal. Certainly big, if not even bigger than Shenmue, because Shenmue was, of course, a massive release back in '99, and this came out in 2000, maybe at a time where the Dreamcast probably almost already was on its way out, and maybe that's why we never got an official translation of it. But it certainly has a lot of charm and style that I think anyone could enjoy, and I would not mind seeing a remake or remaster, maybe even of this game, because when we look at all the success that the Yakuza games have these days, I think this would certainly get a lot of fans. And funnily enough, Sega just did bring up Render Hero again in mentioning it prior to Tokyo Game Show 2024. But the new Render Hero project apparently has something to do with the blockchain and NFTs and stuff like that. So that was a real wet blanket, seeing the Render Hero name, and then immediately reading what they were doing with it. What a shame. But that doesn't mean that you cannot still go back and play the Dreamcast version. This fan-translated version is something I think anyone should check out. And if you're a Shenmue fan, or especially if you're a Yakuza fan, I think you will have a tremendous time with this game. Render Hero is a fantastic game 25 years later, and so is the Sega Dreamcast console. Play Sega Dreamcast today.